Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm back with another episode of the Classic Comics Forum podcast. Now, I've been doing the podcast for about 3 years, but as I mentioned in the previous video, the first 26 episodes we did audio only. So at some point, I am going to bring those onto the YouTube channel. I just want to add some visuals so it's more of an interesting experience for you if you want to watch it and not just listen to it. But beginning with episode 27, we started recording them in video mode. So I'm going to be bringing you the episodes that I do have recordings for here on the YouTube channel now. Last time, I was joined by Icctrombone for the first part of a 3-part discussion of the infamous / classic Avengers storyline, The Fall of Yellowjacket, which ran from Avengers numbers 211 to 230. In the first part, we discussed issues 211 to 213, the infamous issue 213. There was actually so much to talk about with issue 213 that we didn't quite get it all into the first episode. So we'll be starting the second episode with a little bit more about issue 213, and then we'll be continuing up to around issue 220 or so. So that's what we're in store for here in part 2 of our 3-part discussion with Icctrombone about Avengers numbers 211 to 230, and I hope you enjoy.
Look, I just want to add a couple of things about this. You know the thing I love about Marvel? The thought balloons. The thought balloons tells you everything, because somebody could be doing something, but what they're internally thinking is more important than what you're seeing. There's a point where with the court martial, before I get to that, the court martial is very interesting because they bring him up on charges. Like the first page, you see him like standing in front of all of them, and he's saying, "Well, we're going to bring you up on charges and this and that," and you understand, okay. And then like he understands it, and then like, "Oh, you have to turn in your badge and your Avengers stuff," and he's like, there's a moment where he goes, "I have to turn this in," almost like he's crushed, like that's when he realizes, wow, this is really serious. They're taking my Avengers credentials away. Well, he goes with Jan, and she starts jumping all over him, smothering him, and he gets kind of feisty. But then he realizes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm scared, this and that." So now, after that, the Avengers, they all go their separate ways because I think the court martials will follow a week or whatever. And they start internally thinking, okay, do I have a right to judge him? And Captain America begins to think, well, there was a time in World War II where it looked like I was going to die, and I just started fighting everybody and took off my uniform, my army greens, and I just if I was going to go out, I was going to go out at Captain America. So he starts fighting and everything, and at the last second, when everybody's down, he hits the sound, he throws a shield, and he just misses this young little kid collecting cans. And he says to himself, "Do I have a right to judge this guy on a mistake when I made a mistake too? And should I just let him go, drop it and whatever?" And he was like, well, then he comes to the point where he says, well, but still, we're the Avengers and we can't just let mistakes go. We have to address them and this and that. So, which is interesting because that comes back to him a couple of times in this whole run where he says, he feels guilt when things blow up. Because, it's just a court martial, which is supposed to be, they come to give him the charges, he answers it, and they decide to let him off because it looked like everybody was going to let him off. They all kind of internally saying, we're just going to go through this thing and we can't judge him because, whatever. We wish this whole thing went away. Matter of fact, Tygo says, "I don't even know this guy. Why should I be sitting in on him, on judgment on him? And, can I just say not guilty and leave?" And Iron Man goes, "Of course you can." And then his thought balloon says, "Because I would have done the same already." So you kind of get the build up. Everything is building up to this one trial where they're going to let him off. And then he starts acting like a nut. He just comes in, he's "Oh, yeah, the reason you're bringing me up on charges is because Captain America was attracted to this woman, right? You saw this woman and you just wanted to be with her. And that's what you're really mad at." And there's a point, Bob Hall was an amateur at this point, but there's one panel that's just perfect where he starts raving and you see the drawing is closing in more and more on his mouth as he's raving. And then when they pull back, you see all the Avengers like sitting at the table. One person has his head down. Captain America is looking like with like a side view, and somebody else is like kind of looking away, and they're like all ashamed. They're all like stunned and embarrassed and ashamed that he went there, and they're stunned. And it's just a perfect shot. Again, he didn't have his talent yet, but that one panel he nailed it. I was like, wow, look at them. They're all embarrassed. They're like shocked that he went there. And again, the internal dialogue before he goes crazy is they're giving the charges. Well, this is what happened. A combatant put down, stop fighting, and you reignited this and that, and this and that. And what's your answer to that? And before he answers, the thought balloon says, I can't tell him that it was my pride. That out of pride, I can't tell him that I made a mistake and it was just a mistake and I didn't mean to. But so he kind of like, what he's thinking is, I know I blew it, and I I didn't do it on purpose, and my pride is not going to let me admit that I blew it. That's the magic of Marvel, that you always got, not just what was happening, but what people were thinking, which is like human life. We do things but afterwards we go, man, why did I do that? How come I couldn't just shut up? Whatever. So the issue, the build up to that robot attacking is just. It's amazing. It just kind of, you can see it spiraling out of control. This is not where they thought it was going to go. They thought it was just going to be, okay, charges and we suspend you for a week or whatever. And this just went crazy. I mean, of course, when they find out that he hit Jan and she has a black eye, it makes things even worse, because the Thor says, did he strike you? And that's when he summons the robot, and it's a stupid plan, like I Love Lucy plan, it doesn't work. So. But it's just so much. It's almost like everything culminating to this big blow up, and it blows up, and he leaves, and I'm surprised they let them leave. Thor tells him this is a base plan, and how do you think you're gonna get away with this? And he just has his head down. It's like I guess I'll go now, and he leaves. It's just amazing, and amazing to blow up at this issue,
Yeah, it's a great issue. It's interesting. You just mentioned the end of it where. He's like, I guess I'll go now, and he wanders off. It's a great scene, but then you do kind of scratch your head and like, oh, they're just gonna let him like walk off, I guess. What I found particularly interesting about that is in the next issue. So you'll jump to 214. We have an even stranger ending where they do the same thing, but with the Ghost Rider. But before we get to that part, at the beginning of 214, they immediately address the fallout from this 213, where Hank goes. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's weird. My camera just disappeared, and now I have two pictures of you. Well, okay, whatever. Anyway,
I see myself and you.
All right. Yeah. So Hank goes back to the house, and he talks to Jan, and she immediately is like, "I'm getting a divorce," and she offers to like. Get him some money and stuff. So he's like, no. Again, it's his pride. He says, I've got my patents. I got my books. I'm fine. But he doesn't. He's completely broke, and he wanders off. And then whereas he's leaving, she has this thing where she's like, it's a little more final, and she's worried about him, and there's some great character work throughout the storyline. Again, I mentioned earlier, I think this is the most mature storyline that I've read in comics up to that point in comics. When this is coming out in like 81, nothing I've read from before then is nearly as mature as this. I mean mature in the best possible way.
Than what you're used to. And I mean, I would dare say, I don't know if I read of an issue where, two people get divorced and the heroes. I mean, you're seeing a marriage fall apart, and it's not simple. It's dirty. Hey, look, the end of everything is dirty. That's just the way life is. The end of everything is always ugly. And she's, she tells him right away, I'm getting divorced, which I thought that was kind of, I don't know. That also was kind of jarring. I don't know why she came up with that. No therapy, no nothing. Just, I'm divorcing you.
I wonder from a writer, from a Marvel perspective, from a Jim Shooter specifically perspective, I've wondered a couple points in this. We're going to see this again, and I have some notes on next issue, 215. But there's a couple things in here that to me seemed like Jim Shooter responding to the controversy over issue 200. So in 200, they had this thing where Ms. Marvel gets mind controlled by this guy, and it's essentially raped and impregnated. And then at the end, the Avengers just let her go off with this guy. And they just got absolutely killed by the fans and the comics media. And then Chris Claremont wrote Avengers Annual 10 sort of as a rebuttal to that. And
Yeah.
there was things in here in this issue and the next issue and a couple issues times where it felt like Shooter was being very careful to when stuff was happening to the female characters to have them react in a much larger way. And I wonder if some of this is him reacting to all the criticism that they justifiably got for issue 200, which he co-wrote.
I guess they didn't, if you're saying that he didn't want the woman to be a victim stories, I guess that's one way to go. I guess, all these comic books and all stories, they're all forks in the road. You could go to the right, you could go to the left. You could do what you want with the character. What people complain about is that they'll say, oh, that character wouldn't have done that, but we don't know. I mean, people, we don't, again, you said it perfectly before. It's kind of jarring. A lot of things are jarring about this. I don't know if she was fed up because they want to do revisionist history and say, well, she was always supporting him, a weak, fragile guy, and I never saw that. But I mean, if that's the way they want to go with the story, then they're going to do it. But, I thought that her just getting a divorce, a quick one in Dominican Republic, I was like, wow, But just getting to the point where, what you mentioned, that she offered him the money and his pride decided, I can't take money from you. That sets up a lot of things. That sets up a lot of bad things,
It does.
Just to throw, other things from the issue. I mean, it's, the main story is a Ghost Rider, and they, there's stuff, the parallels to that too. But there's just that, they're not just walking away. Tony Stark meets Donald Blake, a door at the World Trade Center when it was still up, and they just, he says, well, what are you gonna do? And and Blake says, well, I'm not a psychologist, but maybe he needs therapy and whatever. And she goes, yeah, I'll pay. Tony says, I'll pay for the therapist and to help this guy. We're not just gonna abandon the guy. So he walks away the previous issue, but they're not washing their hands. They're saying, well, this was our teammate and Jan's husband, and we're not just gonna abandon the guy. We have to do something to help him, which I kind of like. It wasn't like he just walks away and, oh well, what's next on the agenda? They're actually helping them. So that is good.
Yeah, I agree. I love the character work here. I started to say this earlier, and I didn't finish formulating my thought, but not only is this the most mature storyline that I can remember in comics up to this point, it's actually a lot more mature than most of the so-called mature readers stuff that came after it. So, later in the 80s, we get all this like sex and violence and all this over-the-top stuff. But the stuff we have in this Avengers storyline is like actually mature, adult, like real world. Because the thing is, this story isn't about heroes, it's about people. It's about the people that are inside the costume. It's about the friendships and the relationships between the people that happen to also be the original Avengers, and how they deal with all sorts of unexpected things. It's like, yes, the Hank and Jan are directly dealing with the end of their marriage, but we get this very interesting stuff where we see the other characters that are dealing with, they don't know what to do. And it's like, I have friends, I'm at that age, you go through these age parts of your life. When I was 30, I was going through the part of my life where all my friends were getting married. And now that I'm in my mid 40s, I'm at the point of my life where my friends are all getting divorced. Yeah. And like, I've been in the same situation that these people, I mean, just this year, I've been in the same situation that these people were in, where like you have friends and you're friends with both of them and they get a divorce and you don't know what you're supposed to do. And so this is just, it's great. It's just, the writing is so good. Sometimes Shooter takes liberties with the characters in terms of how they've previously been established in order to get to what he's trying to do. But what he's trying to do is really, really good.
I happen to think Jim Shooter is one of the top writers in comics of all time. And I always started following him from company to company to company. And I found all this stuff to be superb, and just to say, it's interesting that you mentioned about the mature reader and those themes. I think the fact that it wasn't all like no holds bar comic book. There's a lot of comics code, and they didn't just want to throw sex and violence into it. That they were more they had to more focus on the actual the pathos of the characters and what was happening to them. And there's something that the Avengers always had, where they didn't have a right to a certain, to like pretty much their whole history, maybe to this point, they didn't interfere with each other's lives to the point where they didn't even know each other's identities. It isn't until like a couple issues now that they find out after all years, oh, Tony Stark is Iron Man. They don't know. So what comes with that is that you don't interfere with their business. Like if Tony Stark becomes an alcoholic, you don't know what to do. That's his business, sort of. You know what I mean? Like that and that's what happens here. There's a scene before in issue 212 where they go to confront the Elf Queen, where he's screaming at like Wasp, and the Avengers look at each other and go like, what do we do? And he goes, nothing. It's awkward, and they don't know there's a married couple, but they're also in the Avengers, and I think they get into a fight and they leave Wasp behind, and Yellowjacket's like, let's go, leave her, and they don't know what to do. So again, the whole thing about not interfering, and that comes to play in the future issues too, because there are points where you should confront. Like, you have a friend, sometimes you have to confront your friend. And it's not perfect, but sometimes you have to. But they had this thing where this is a superhero club, and well, we're only here to beat up Kang, and then afterwards I'm going home. You know what I mean? I hope you're doing okay, but I can't interfere in your life. And it should have been more. It should have been more, because these guys, they bonded together, and they should have cared. I guess they should have did something about that rule where you don't interfere or whatever, because again, it's just awesome that you see that. You see that they don't even know what they're like stunned. They're two married couple fighting, and nobody knows what to say.
Yeah. So just real quick with 214, because I want to get right into 215 and 16, because we have exactly what you're talking about, where we get into some of their personal lives and their secret identity stuff. But you mentioned in 214, the main story is about Ghost Rider, and it's irrelevant mostly. But Jim Shooter actually has Captain America in the story comment on the fact that this story is another sort of mirror that he's holding up as a parallel to Hank Pym, where we have the Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze. He can no longer control himself as Ghost Rider, and so when he gets angry, he turns into a literal rage monster, and goes berserk. And Captain America's like, this is kind of like what's happening with Hank. And we're going to see this again. He brings up the same sort of parallel later with Drax the Destroyer. So that was interesting. I thought it was, part of me thought it was more interesting that he actually had Captain America say it, because in some of these other ones, he doesn't really make it that obvious that he's doing a parallel.
I think the beginning of that issue, it opens with Captain America working out of the gym and like just going crazy and destroying everything. And you could tell he's mad because I'm the guy who brought up a bunch of charges, and look what happened, and he's going crazy. And it comes to a point where Jarvis talks to him. He says, look, the American dream, he talks to him about, you have to let people become what they're going to become, and you can't fix anything. He had to make a choice, and we know Hank Pym's going to come back because he has a spirit, and he's going to come back from this and whatever. And he kind of calms Captain America down. Because Captain America, he's always has a speech ready, but this is one where he's like, man, this is kind of my fault. I brought him up on charges, and the guy went up on defend, and now his marriage is done. He's kind of taking it all on himself and saying it's all my fault. I should have just let it go.
Well, it's interesting, So that speech is interesting that Jarvis gets him, because then at the end of the issue, it comes back around where Ghost Rider is turned back into Johnny Blaze, and the Avengers are like, well, you're gonna have to figure it out. We can't take care of everything, like Big Brother, like Jarvis was saying. And they just wander off and leave the Ghost Rider just sitting on the ground there. And I was like, what are you doing? The guy just went berserk and tried to kill everybody.
The actual excuse is, well, he turned back into Johnny Blaze, and Johnny Blaze didn't do anything. Ghost Rider did.
I mean, that's just, it's crazy.
I'm like, yeah, okay. Whatever.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about 215 and 216. There's this two-parter with the Molecule Man. I don't want to spend too much time on this because most of it doesn't directly relate to the Hank Pym stuff, but this is a favorite story of mine. I've always loved this two-parter. There are a couple things here. It starts off with a sequence that I think goes on way too long, with Tigra sort of wandering around town and being basically sexually harassed by a number of different random strangers. That
Well,
sequence just...
the way you're dressed, as one of the people say.
Yeah.
The way you're dressed. So whatever.
Yeah, like someone like grabs her butt, and then the cop that sees it is like, "You're asking for it for being dressed like that." And to me, this read like Jim Shooter wanting to write an opportunity to have Tigra tell them they're wrong, as basically as a defense of what he wrote in issue 200. Again, I might be wrong, but that sequence to me went on way too long. I thought that was unnecessary.
Or maybe they want. I mean, there's another way of looking at it. This is the two-parter where essentially at the end they dump Tigra, right? I mean, so they want to show you what she's about, what she, and you said, you pointed before that she's not cut out to be an Avenger, but so they want to give you everything about her and where she's coming from. I mean, yeah, I don't know anything about the character. I just love the Alan Weiss art.
The Alan Weiss art is great. It's really great. I love the cover of 216 where Molecule Man is sleeping and he's got the stuffed Molecule Man doll like under his arm.
Yeah, he did some nice work there. I tell you, that's an interesting thing. I remember years ago we had a classic Christmas, the favorite runs or whatever, and I picked one of these. I picked this, but I mentioned I forget the total stats, but this is a weird arc where they changed the writers like 4 times. They changed the artists like 6, 7 times, and it's just there's some books that felt like filler issues. It was just weird that I had so much love for this run, and yet it did everything it could to like derail. Because usually a run that people love has the same artist and writer the whole way down, and that's what makes it nice. But this one, despite some of the amateurish art that you saw here and there, I mean, it still resonated because the writing was that strong.
Yeah, it is weird. There's like a different artist on almost every story throughout this whole arc. Every issue or 2 issues, there's
you think it was like a deadline thing?
I don't know what it was. I mean, he's the editor-in-chief, so he can put anybody on the book that he wants to have draw it. And so I don't know why he was deciding on the people he was bringing in, because it was weird. Plot-wise, it's basically Silver Surfer's there. Molecule Man gets inspired by Silver Surfer to become Galactus, and he tries to eat the planet. The Avengers try and stop him, and they fail spectacularly, except for at the end, Tigra sort of actually saves the day because she basically just talks to him about why he feels like such a loser and convinces him to go seek therapy. And so he gives up. That's the only reason they win, is because Tigra talks him into giving up. And then she quits the team. There were a couple things I wanted to talk about in here, though. As part of this story, the one part that really touches on the arc we've been going through with Hank and Jan is in several issues now, we've had Tony Stark and Don Blake. They know each other's identities. They've known each other's identities for a long time. It's been a plot point in previous Avengers stories as far back as in my memory. In issue 113, it's an important plot point that they know each other's secret identities.
That's the first time they acknowledge it.
Yeah.
They run past each other and go, hey, if you see Tony Stark in that room, tell him hi. So they like wink at each other. It's like, oh, we both.
Yeah. But everybody knows that Steve Rogers is Captain America, but they haven't told him their secret identity. And so in this story, they learn his secret identity, and I thought that was really important to the theme of this story as a whole, because it's not about the heroes, it's about the people inside the costumes. And I think he needed to have them all know who they really are. And there's a line there where when he finds out, I think it's Tony Stark who's like, I feel pretty silly in retrospect that I didn't tell you this a long time ago, because why am I keeping this secret?
Yeah, it comes into play too in a future issue.
It does, and
in a big way, because I mean, I don't want to.
Let's save that for 224, because I think 224 might be even though there's like no superhero stuff in it, it might be the best issue of the whole series of Avengers. It's like it's so good. But
You know
we'll
what?
save that.
I think so too. I think that might be one of the. There's about of this 20 issue run. There's about three or four issues where I go, that's the major issue right there. That's a major issue. And you're right. But anyway, let's get to where we get to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the other thing that's just of note here, it doesn't really come into play in this arc, but it's really important going forward for Marvel as a whole, is at the end of the storyline, Captain America and Iron Man, who is in a civilian identity, Tony Stark, because Molecule Man destroyed his armor, they get in an argument about whether they should kill Molecule Man, because Tony's like, he's so powerful, while we have the chance, we have to kill him because he can destroy all of reality. And Steve Rogers is like, we don't have the right to do that. And they almost come to blows over it, and that's when Tigra interrupts them. But this argument between them becomes a fundamental argument that continues in not just in the comics, but in the movies right up to the present day. We see it especially in Operation Galactic Storm in issue whatever that was, 347, where they have this exact argument when Tony leads a group of Avengers to kill the Supreme Intelligence. But then, of course, that divide then basically leads to civil war and everything after it. And we've seen them argue about things before during the Korvac saga. They had a couple big arguments, but not like this. This is like a fundamental difference of viewpoints that is important to Marvel, and we really see it here in this one page of this story.
This might be the first time that this subject is brought up, because before this, everybody's goody two shoes, and nobody would think, oh, we got to kill him. Everybody would go, oh, well, what can we do? We have to imprison him, but this is the first time, and you're right, it does come to play other times, most notably Fantastic Four issue, the Burn Run, where Galactus comes in and he's weaker, and every hero attacks him, like the Avengers, Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, they all go at him, and the only reason they defeat him is because he's weak. But anyway, it comes to a point where we have to kill him, and Richards goes, we can't kill him, we have to save him. So it kind of, and they allude to this issue. They say, well, we had the same argument before about Molecule Man, and you're right. That's probably the first time that you could see that Tony Stark is a little more cold and more realistic than the other characters are, because in 1965 they would all agree, oh, we got to save him. Nobody would have came up with we got to kill him. I mean, Tony even tells him, look, you could take me in afterwards, but I'm killing him. And Captain America, you have to get through me first. Yeah. So it is a very interesting little thing there that they throw in there.
All right, so let's talk about 217, because now we're back to the main storyline here. We get the return of Hank Pym. It's a focus on him. We actually start off we get the first appearance of Fabian Stankiewicz, who's a favorite character for Avengers fans. We'll see him again. That was fun. But the main thing is we get huge character development here. Jan comes back to active duty, and she immediately, as we talked about earlier, is like, I'm going to be the new team leader. You should all vote for me. I'm going to take over as Avengers leader. And the other Avengers, which at this point is just Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man, they're like, okay.
They get Shanghaied into it. And, right before that, she walks in and says, oh, yeah, I just got divorced. So, that's how fast it happened. So, he went from I'm divorced to make me the team leader. And they went with it. I mean, what could they say,
So we get that. And then we go over to Hank, and we get the beginning of the rest of his storyline, which is that he basically hits rock bottom. He's desperate for money. His arch nemesis Egghead shows up, and Egghead gives him the sob story about how he's reformed and he just wants to do one nice thing and give his niece this prosthetic arm, because, of course, in a previous storyline, he had blown off his niece's arm. And so he was like, she doesn't trust me, but she'll trust you. And so Hank basically is desperate, and I got the impression he was sort of believed Egghead, but he was just in that place where he was like, I didn't know what else to do. So he goes and he delivers this prosthetic arm, and then it turns out that there's circuitry in it that allows Egghead to mind control her and take it over her body. And Egghead uses her as a hostage to force Hank to steal adamantium so that Egghead can build some sort of indestructible thing. and Hank ends up sort of saving the day because he signals the Avengers to come stop him, and they show up and they had no idea that he's going to be there. And so then we've got this confrontation where the Avengers are facing Hank, and they defeat him barely. And Egghead has set everything up so that there's no trace of Egghead's influence, and the girl doesn't remember Egghead. She actually thinks that Hank Pym was doing this all and was controlling her himself. And so he basically sets up Yellowjacket as the fall guy, and the Avengers arrest him, and everyone thinks that he's become a supervillain, and that's where the issue leaves off.
There's a pivotal point that you went over very early in the issue, right after the meeting. They make her the chairperson. They cut away to a scene where he's like desperate, and he calls Tony Stark. I don't know if you remember this part.
Yeah.
And there's a secretary that's like filling in for Miss Habergash or whatever her name was, and she's, oh yeah, I put you on hold, and puts her on hold. She starts doing nails, and it's like a bubblehead, and the money runs out, and he has no more money, and of course the line gets dropped, and then Mrs. Habergash comes from lunch and goes, oh, anything happened while I was powdering my nose? And she goes, oh, yeah, some guy named Tony, Hank Blum or something like that called. You mean Hank Pym? Boss has been waiting for his call this time. What happened? Oh, I don't know. I guess he hung up. And she's like, Stark is going to kill me. And that's so pivotal, because if that call goes through, now everything, he's swallowing his pride. He'll take the therapy, and then it goes a different way. But the whole idea that call didn't get answered puts him in a bind, So I mean, and there's something else I want to know. This whole thing about Tony, that Hank Pym was crazy and all this stuff. He only acted crazy in that court martial. If you notice, after that, there's no more craziness. It's all like despair and whatever. But he's not acting irrational or violent or any of that stuff. Even here, he's down in his luck. But he's not acting aggressive or anything. As a matter of fact, when he's trying to steal that adamantium for Egghead, he takes on the Avengers and has a pretty good showing there. I mean, he beats up a little bit his ex-wife, and he knows their weaknesses, so he's kind of taking them on. And this is Yellowjacket against Thor and Iron Man. I mean, he does a pretty good showing there. So it shows that he's capable. He's like the regular guy now again. It's almost like he had a bad period with the breakdown, and now he's kind of coming back, and then this happens. So now he's really in jail. He's not gonna let him walk away this time. No. After the rest, and that's that.
So after this, we get 218 is a complete fill-in issue. No Jim Shooter, nothing to do with the storyline at all. So I don't really have much to say about it. It's just an issue that happened.
It dropped out of nowhere. It dropped out of space. It just I'm wondering if who was behind the fill-in issues, because it's not the only one. There's about 3 or 4 that you could classify as fill-in issues, with a different writer, different artist, and then doesn't really have much to do with continuity. But I mean, just wondering with Jim Shooter. I mean, of course, as the editor-in-chief, he's the busy guy.
I think that was mainly it. One thing that's interesting is the same exact thing happened when he was on the Korvac saga. He had a couple fill-in issues that interrupted at 169 is just like a random fill-in issue. And then right as they get to the end with issue, I think is 176, he's not writing it anymore. Right when they get to the end. And the same thing happens in this storyline. I think we're seeing here he's starting to struggle with keeping pace, and we're going to start to see issues after this where he's plotting it, but other people are doing the scripting and adding the dialogue over his plots before he completely drops off. One thing that I find interesting is, see, in the Korvac saga, I found that fill-in to be really jarring and out of place. Here, though, I actually think most of the fill-ins are pretty good. This one's the worst of them. Most of them are pretty good, but I think it actually helps the pacing of the story to not have them happen one right after the other, but having these gaps where other things are happening and having it play out over a longer period of time, I think when we go back to them, it's not like Hank Pym's been in jail since last issue. It's that Hank Pym's been in jail for like 5 issues now, and now we're going back to him. And I think it actually weirdly helps to have some of these interruptions with stories that don't directly have to do with the story.
But if you're following the book, it's lurking in the back of your mind. Like, I mean, this is the first of a few types of runs like this where I couldn't wait to read the next one. I was literally like, wow, will the Avengers come out yet? I want to see what's happening with Hank. And sometimes when there's no Hank, I'm like, oh, I cared more about the Hank story than I did about who they were fighting or whatever.
Yeah.
The only thing, this is a so-so, nothing filling issue. The only thing I'm gonna notice is that the kid, who's like immortal, every time he dies, comes back, whatever. He almost gets raped by Lauren Hardy in this book. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
I'm like, Lauren Hardy, this kid? Come on. And it turns out he got a gun in his pocket, so they back off.
That was a weird sequence. I don't think we'd be seeing that in a mainstream Marvel book these days.
That's the only thing I remember about the book. Lauren Hardy was gonna rape him. Whatever.
So jumping ahead, so the next we have a two-parter that doesn't directly have to do with the Hank storyline. So we won't spend too much time on it, but there's a couple things that are interesting because we get another parallel to Hank's arc, and then we also get some more mind control stuff because basically Moondragon's spaceship shows up and the Avengers feel compelled to get on it, and it whisks them away. There's a weird message on there from Drax the Destroyer, and the ship whisks them back to this faraway planet where Moondragon has become this benevolent savior to the planet. And she's like, oh, I'm calling you here because I need your help because there's this civil war and everyone's going to kill each other and I don't have the power to stop them. And so the Avengers are like, okay, but they all feel like their heads aren't right. They're not sure about what they're thinking. They stop this so-called civil war. But Captain America's like, well, before we go back to Earth, let's just hang out in this nice paradise for a while because he really wants to investigate what's happening. And of course, it turns out that Moondragon is actually mind controlling the entire population of the whole planet to force them to be peaceful. And the Avengers have this dilemma. They don't think about it too much, but they have a bit of a dilemma where they're like, if we give them free will, they're going to revert to warlike state and they're going to kill each other. But they decide, being good Americans, to give them the free will. And so they fight back. One of the big things in this story is that Thor is mind controlled by Moondragon into becoming her love slave. And he only gets out of it because he turns back into Don Blake, who she's not controlling because she doesn't know it's the same person. Yeah. And I'll just say there's a lot of this going on in the series at this point. Not just the mind control, but it's like, it felt a little weird for Shooter to be dipping back into the mind control sex slave thing so soon after issue 200 when that blew up in his face. On the other hand, though, no one ever seems to have really cared that this happens in this issue. It's really only the last few years where I've heard some people going like, hey, wait a minute, did you read that creepy thing in Avengers 220 with Thor? Because now that we think about it, that's messed up.
Yeah, she kind of raped him. I mean, there's alluded they have a scene where, she's, oh, did you finish your nap? And he's like totally nude underneath the blanket. And I'm like, sheesh, I mean, I guess if she's going to rule the planet, she might as well have hot Asgardian sex, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. It was weird, but I mean, this mind control thing. I don't know if you see that too much in comics these days. That's something that I think back then.
I don't read a lot of new comics, but I feel like they've learned their lesson from these stories not to do that.
It's kind of sloppy. It's kind of lazy. Oh yeah, you got mind control. It's a much more interesting story if no one got mind control and they just did it. And it was a mistake, or they chose to do something bad, or whatever,
Yeah, but the more interesting thing is that there's a sequence here where the Avengers have been sort of doubting themselves this whole run because of Moondragon messing with them in issue 211, and we get them really talking about it here finally, where they're like, how does anyone really know when they're controlling their own thoughts? I felt like this was um, commentary on Hank Pym's mental health situation. And
Mhm.
I think that was made more. Another parallel that they use here is with Drax, because Drax the Destroyer is being mind controlled to be a peaceful person. And so they free him of the mind control, and he absolutely berserk into this murderous rage where he's going to kill his own daughter for mind
Mhm.
controlling him. And I think they were basically making him into a sort of cartoon version of what Hank did in issue 213, to sort of again show another sort of mirror of that, where he goes absolutely insane and tries to kill her.
Wow. I didn't give it that much thought. I just figured Drax Destroyer, that's what he does. Right?
I might be overthinking it. I've been known to do that.
No, it's legit. I'm just saying, like I just saw, it's interesting because his nature is to be warlike, and Iron Man is the one that breaks him out of it because they're looking at a video and he's saying, "Hold on, you were there, and Captain America was just about to get killed. Why didn't you say something? Why don't you just almost let him get killed? I mean, that's not you, And he kind of badgers him into a he goes, "No, I remember everything. She did this and whatever. So yeah, it's a weird book. Nice ending though. They said they can't take her to jail, so they say, well, we'll take her to Odin, where he'll
I liked that a lot.
and stuff.
That was great when Thor brings her to Asgard. There was another great scene earlier where Iron Man he thinks he's being manipulated by Moondragon and becoming angrier. But whatever the reason, there's a thing where he loses patience with Thor fighting back, and basically is like, "I'm gonna walk over your body to take her out," and he just like starts trash talking Thor. It's really great.
Yeah, it's weird. It was a weird issue. I don't know. The artwork, that Bob Hall got a little better, but it was still, it was a lot better actually than 20213. So you can see he's developing a little more talent, but he doesn't last long because they start bringing other artists in. Pretty much, you only see him. Again, he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for the big time, but it looked like he was just putting anybody on these books.
Yeah, it was just like every issue there's a new artist.
Yeah. Did he give like 5 different plots to 5 different artists at the same time? And
It's possible he may have. I think they said they did that with Alan Weiss's story because he's so slow at drawing that they gave him that plot a long time in advance. Okay, that's it for this episode. A little bit of an abrupt ending. I just don't have the time to do all the smooth transitions right now, but that's it for this time. We've gotten up to the end of issue 220. Next time, in episode 29 of the Classic Comics Forum podcast, Icctrombone and I will finish our discussion. We'll talk about issues 221 to 230 and the end of the Trial of Yellowjacket storyline. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'm really curious to see what people think about this run on Avengers, so feel free to leave comments below, and I'll see you next time.